There's this feeling that I think a lot of us have, kind of sits in the back of your mind. It's this sense that the whole financial game, it's just fundamentally changed. Many people feel like they're failing financially.
But when they compare their lives to their grandparents, the question becomes unavoidable.
How did one income once support a family, a home, and a future? While today, two incomes still feel stretched. This explainer isn't about blame, and it's not about nostalgia. It's about a quiet financial shift that changed how money works, and most people never noticed when it happened. So, to really get why today feels so different, we have to go back in time. We need to look at the period that basically set all our expectations for what a normal economy should look like. I'm talking about the era right after World War II, what some people call the golden age of capitalism. Okay, take a look at this chart. What's so incredible about it is that it basically shows an unwritten promise in action. For 25 years or so after the war, the deal was really simple. If the country got more productive, if you worked harder and created more value, you got paid more. It's right there in the data. See how those two lines for productivity and pay move together? They're almost in perfect sync. And the numbers here really drive the point home. Productivity shot up by almost 97%, and worker pay, it kept right up, rising over 91%. Now, this connection, it wasn't some kind of accident. It was the engine that built a huge, thriving middle class. Why? Because the rewards of a growing economy were actually being shared. So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, this whole period was really defined by one thing: predictability. You could count on your wages going up. The whole world's money system was stable. Inflation, it was low. You knew what to expect. And all of that together created a world where, yeah, a single income could often be enough. Enough for a house, enough to support a family, enough to build a real future. That was the world our grandparents grew up in.
But then, things started to change. Around the early 1970s, something fundamental began to shift under the surface. And it wasn't some big, dramatic explosion. It was more like a series of quiet, technical decisions that ended up completely rewriting the rules of money.
All right, so let's walk through what happened. By the 1960s, because of things like foreign aid and military spending, there were just a ton of US dollars floating around the world. And this put a massive strain on the US gold reserves. Because remember, every one of those dollars was supposedly backed by gold. Then came August 15th, 1971. President Nixon made this pretty stunning announcement. They called it the Nixon shock. And he basically said, we're temporarily closing the gold window. Foreign countries couldn't trade their dollars for our gold anymore. Well, by 1973, temporary became permanent. And just like that, the system that had kept the world economy stable for decades, it was gone. So what exactly was lost when this happened? Well, that Bretton Woods system, it was basically the anchor for the entire post-war economy. It meant the US dollar had a fixed, solid value, exactly $35 for 1 ounce of gold. Simple. Then other countries would peg their currencies to the dollar. And what did that do? It created this incredibly stable and predictable foundation for the whole world to trade and do business. And what did we get instead? We moved to what's called a fiat currency system. And that's the system we're all living in right now. With a fiat dollar, its value isn't tied to something physical like gold. It's based entirely on trust. Trust in the government that prints it. This change was huge because it removed the physical limit on how much money could be created. It gave governments and central banks way more flexibility, for better and, as we'll see, for worse. Now, this switch from a gold-backed dollar to a fiat one, it might sound like a really technical, boring change that only economists would care about, but it wasn't. It set in motion this deep, long-term split that would completely reshape financial reality for everyday people, for you and me. Okay, remember that first chart we looked at? The one where those two lines for pay and productivity were moving together so nicely? Well, look at what happened after the rules of money changed. Starting in the late 70s, those lines just break apart. You see, productivity, that's the value workers are creating, it keeps going up and up, but the line for worker pay, it almost completely flattens out. This moment right here, this is what's known as the Great Divergence. And let's put some real numbers to this. Between 1979 and 2021, the economy got almost 65% more productive. But what about pay for the typical worker? It only went up by about 17% in that same time. Think about that. The economic pie kept getting bigger and bigger, but the slice going to the average person, It just stopped growing with it. The link was totally broken.
And here's the other half of the story. While wages were basically flatlining, the cost of the things you need for a middle-class life, they started to skyrocket. And I mean way faster than normal inflation. Just look at housing, up over 1,000%. Public college tuition, up 177%, even after you adjust for inflation. You can just feel the squeeze, can't you? Your pay is crawling up, but the price of entry for a stable life is on a rocket ship.
This right here, this is where all that big picture economic data starts to feel really personal. Because these huge systemic changes created this massive gap. A gap between the financial expectations we all inherited and the reality we're actually living day to day.
I mean, let's just put it side by side. Think about our grandparents' time. One income could actually buy a home. You could pay for college with a summer job. And if a second person in the family worked, that money was extra. It was a safety net, a buffer. Now, let's look at today. Two incomes are often the absolute bare minimum, just to keep your head above water. College pretty much means you're taking on serious debt. And that margin for error, it's basically gone. There's just no room for things to go wrong. There's this quote from a book called The Two-Income Trap that just nails this idea perfectly. It says that the second income isn't an insurance policy anymore. For so many families, that insurance policy has already been cashed in, just to pay the regular monthly bills. And what that means is that they're actually more financially exposed, more at risk, than a single-income family was a generation or two ago.
So we've looked at all this data, right? From that stable post-war world to this great divergence. So what's the one core insight? What's the main thing you should really take away from all of this?
Here it is. This wasn't some sudden, dramatic collapse. The rules of money just changed, and everyday life slowly, quietly followed along. It's like the world our grandparents lived in was running on a completely different financial operating system, and that shift in the 70s, that was the system update. And for the past 50 years, all of our personal finances have just been trying to adapt to this new code.
Now, understanding this shift, it doesn't magically fix everything, but it does explain so much. It explains why so many of us feel this same pressure, even when we feel like we're doing everything right. It shows that this feeling, of running faster and faster just to stay in the same place, it's not a personal failure. It's a completely rational response to a huge, fundamental change in the economic world around us.
And just to be perfectly clear, this explainer is for understanding, not advice. The goal here isn't to tell you what to do, but to give you a clearer lens on the past, so we can all better understand the pressures we're facing today.